Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder if your consciousness, that feeling of being you, is something made just for you, or if it is built from something bigger, something shared with others? Today we're diving into some fascinating ideas that challenge the way we usually think about what makes us conscious. Most science today looks inside a single brain, trying to find the consciousness switch. But what if that is the wrong place to look? What if consciousness isn't something you hatch all by yourself, but something that emerges when we all get together and interact? For a long time, scientists have been really focused on what's happening in our brains. Think of them like detectives trying to find a specific brain region or a special brain activity pattern that's responsible for consciousness. They've looked at things like brain cells talking to each other, or how different parts of the brain connect. They hope that by finding these brain patterns that happen when we say we're conscious, they could reverse engineer consciousness itself. But as this paper points out, even with all the amazing tools we have today, it has been incredibly tough to explain that inner subjective feeling of consciousness, that what it is like to be you just by looking at brain wiring. This is where the idea of a social theory of consciousness comes in. It's not a brand new idea though. Way back, over 100 years ago, people like Cooley and Mead were already suggesting that our minds and our consciousness are shaped by our interactions with others. They believed that to truly understand consciousness, we need to look at how we behave and connect as a group. More recently, thinkers like Prince have revived these ideas. Prince suggests that we actually understand things like wanting or believing by first observing them in others. You see someone else wanting ice cream, and then you start to think about yourself as someone who wants things. It's like we learn about our own inner world by watching the inner worlds of others and then applying those models to ourselves. He explores how our mind, including things like our will and our thoughts, is built through these social interactions. He paints a detailed picture of this process, drawing from different fields like psychology, philosophy, and even neuroscience. Graziano Social Theory of Consciousness Center. Another key figure is Michael Graziano. He has a theory that having consciousness is very much tied to believing you have consciousness. You attribute consciousness to yourself, and even to other things like animals or even objects, based on how they behave. But the paper notes that even Graziano, while highlighting the social side, still struggles a bit to explain how individual consciousness could pop up before any social interaction. And he focuses a lot on attention, suggesting a special attention schema theory. But the paper here wonders if we need separate explanations for every aspect of consciousness, like beliefs, emotions, or thoughts. Or could the same social mechanisms explain all of them? Scroll here, I attempt to describe a simple, more consistent, and more general version of the social theory of consciousness. Center, that is what this paper aims to do. It argues for a simpler, more unified social theory of consciousness that can explain a lot of why we feel conscious. Instead of looking for a magical brain mechanism, it starts with behavior and how we adapt to the world around us. Scroll basic assumptions of social theory of consciousness center. The core idea is this. Consciousness needs more than one brain. It starts by looking at how we deal with the world. We have to understand how things work, like how a ball rolls or how water boils. But when it comes to other living things, especially people, trying to predict their behavior based on just physical laws is way too complicated. So, we create simpler, flexible models. We invent things like desires, beliefs, and intentions to guess what someone else might do. These models aren't perfect, but they're good enough for us to get along and interact with each other every day. Scroll when models of this kind are already used for other people. These can be easily generalized to oneself. Center, the really interesting part is how these models then get turned inward. You see others attributing these inner states to you. You might notice your own actions are similar to how others behave when we assume they have certain desires or thoughts. So, you start believing that you have these desires, beliefs, and intentions inside yourself. This makes sense especially for humans because we have language and we learn so much from others. We don't have to invent all these mental models from scratch, we get them from our parents and society. Scroll while attribution of psychological mechanisms to other organisms has a clear, practical purpose. The generalization of these mechanisms to oneself has not so obvious function. Center, it makes perfect sense to think about what others are thinking to navigate the social world. But why turn these models on ourselves? The paper suggests self-consciousness might have even started as a kind of side effect, a byproduct of being so good at modeling other people. But it could also be useful for really complex social tasks, scroll attention, and other internal mechanisms. Center, the writer here, agrees with Graziano about attention being one of these internal models we use to predict behavior. When we apply that model to ourselves, we get that feeling of consciously paying attention to something. The same logic applies to attributing desires, beliefs, and intentions to ourselves. Essentially, we build a model of ourselves as an agent who has all these mental qualities. Scroll in this study, I use consciousness mostly in a broad philosophical sense, denoting all mental phenomena center. And when we talk about consciousness here, it's used in a big, broad way to mean all our mental stuff, even things we might not be fully aware of. The paper clarifies that the actual physical stuff, the neurobiology in the brain, isn't conscious or unconscious itself. It's the information and models we use that become our consciousness. These mental models we use to understand people are basically what we call folk psychology, our everyday understanding of how minds work. Scroll neurobiological implementation of consciousness C-center. So, where does the brain fit in? If consciousness is about these information models, then the brain is how we store that information, just like it stores any other information about the world. We don't need a special consciousness circuit in the brain. Our brains might develop areas that are good at processing information about other people's behavior, intentions, and emotions because other people are so important to us. But the brain mechanisms themselves don't define consciousness. It's the social meaning of that information, the fact that it's used to understand and predict the behavior of other similar beings. That makes it consciousness. Scroll the hard problem of consciousness C-center. Remember that hard problem of consciousness explaining why we have subjective experiences, this social theory offers a way around it. Instead of trying to explain subjective experience from brain processes, it suggests that the presence of subjective experience can be explained by our behavior and our social interaction. It's not a special brain mechanism that creates consciousness, but the special demands of our social environment that lead us to create these internal models. Scroll machine consciousness center, this idea also has implications for artificial intelligence. Many attempts to create conscious machines highlight the importance of social interaction between agents. Experiments with artificial agents that need to understand and predict each other's behavior show that social learning is key to developing something like consciousness in machines. And think about the Turing test, where we try to tell if a machine is smart by talking to it. That test assumes consciousness is something we can see in communication. But under this social theory, there is no single correct way to know if a machine is conscious. It is something that gets attributed by us. Screw reality or illusion, I center. So is our inner world real or an illusion? Most of us feel like we have consciousness. And in a way we do. Our mental models of how people behave are a huge part of how we see the world. We have a strong sense of ourselves as subjects who think and feel and intend things, but the paper argues that these mental states are like hypothetical tools, like imaginary gears and levers inside people, that we use to explain their behavior. Scroll, however, these mental states and variables exist in our thinking only as hypothetical mechanisms behind observed behavior of people. Center, we use these models to predict, describe, and even influence people's actions, but they are tools for understanding, not direct observations of a hidden inner reality. And the paper points out a fascinating consequence when we use these modeling mechanisms to explain complex natural phenomena. We can even end up seeing conscious actors behind things like spirits, gods, or devils. It's a bit like how novelists and filmmakers use psychology to create characters and stories. Scroll different models of behaving organisms side to center. Now, natural scientists can explain and predict behavior using just physical stuff, stimuli, and brain mechanisms. And those scientific predictions could be more accurate if we had all the data, like every detail of a person's genes and environment all at once. But that is pretty much impossible for us to process. Mental models, on the other hand, are much simpler. They use observable behavior and communication. Because they're simpler, we can use them in everyday life. Even though psychology's predictive power is often modest, these mental models are crucial for navigating our social world. Scroll, when building neurobiological and psychological models to explain the same behavior, we can expect some similarity between these models. Center, when we build brain models and mental models to explain the same behavior, there will be some overlap. For example, how we see light relates to the brain activity in our visual system. But for more complex things like thinking or decision-making, the brain mechanisms and mental models are very different. This is why scientists look for neurobiological correlates of consciousness, basically trying to match brain activity with reported conscious experiences. But the paper argues that these correlations are really just between brain activity and behavioral reports. You don't actually need consciousness itself to explain these correlations. Scroll conclusion C-center. So, to wrap it up, this social theory of consciousness offers a really different way to think about what makes us feel alive and aware. It suggests that mental phenomena, our thoughts and feelings and awareness, are like information models that goal-seeking systems, like us, use to understand and predict each other. This approach can explain not only human consciousness, but also similar phenomena in artificial systems. Scroll social theory proposes plausible explanations for strange features of consciousness. C-center, it also offers explanations for some weird things about consciousness that other theories struggle with, like how we can feel like both an observer and part of what is being observed, or how we experience free will in a physical world. The theory gives consciousness a clear adaptive purpose. It's a tool for social interaction. It also helps us understand how brain science and psychology can both work together to explain and influence behavior. This paper really makes you think, doesn't it? By shifting the focus from inside the brain to between brains, it offers a compelling argument that our social interactions are the building blocks of our conscious experience. It's not about finding a special biological ingredient, but about how we use models of each other to make sense of the world and ourselves. It's a powerful idea that connects our inner lives so directly to our outer relationships. What do you all think? Does this social theory of consciousness resonate with you? Let me know in the comments below. If you found this video helpful, give it a big thumbs up, subscribe to Rubin's Mind Lab for more mind-bending science, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next exploration into the human mind. Thanks for watching.